You feel the mountain before you see it. Thin air razors your throat. Every breath is a small bargain. The night smells of cold stone and warm smoke, juniper resin and llama fat, a sweetness that clings to the tongue. Torches hiss against the wind, their flames bent like suffering birds. Somewhere above, a conch horn groans, and the sound slides down the slopes of the Andes as if the mountain itself were exhaling. They bring you to the terrace when the sky is the color of bruised grapes. Your sandals grind grit. Gold plates hammered thinner than leaves catch the firelight and throw it back in shivering halos. A drum begins. 2 notes only, spaced like a second heartbeat. Boom, boom. A handful of coca leaves dries your mouth. The fibers rasp against your gums. You are told to swallow. You do. Nothing changes. The world remains exactly what it is. Vast, indifferent, obedient to power. Below the terrace, the city glows. Roofs glow. Courtyards glow. The river is a ribbon of black glass. Behind you rises a wall of fitted stone so perfect you could not slip a hair between the blocks. It was built to last forever. So was the fear that sustains it. They call you forward. The priest is a silhouette, hair braided and weighted with beads, his face striped with cinnabar like a warning. He does not shout. He does not need to. His voice is level, almost tender, the way a surgeon speaks to the patient he must open. He is the hand of the sun, he says. The empire is the body. Bodies must be ordered, cleansed, made obedient. He speaks as if your fate were the simplest thing in the world, a matter of alignment, of placing one stone upon another until the wall stands. The women stand to the side, still as carved saints. You are not allowed to look long. Their shawls are the color of ripened maize and damp earth. Their hair glints like obsidian. You glimpse a silver spindle gliding through the fingers of one, thread tightening into a perfect line. It is beautiful. It is terrible. In the same moment that beauty catches in your chest, you understand why terror must serve it. The empire is held together by threads, and threads require pulled fingers, steady hands, silent mouths. The conch sounds again, and the drum keeps counting. Somewhere, a piper lets fall a high, reedy note that makes your molars ache. You taste metal. The cold taste of panic. The taste of a coin held too long between your teeth. The priest lifts a shallow bowl. The smoke is sour sweet. He marks your forehead. The ash itches. He speaks your new condition in words that do not invite reply. You are not simply a person now. You are a function. You are a sign. You are a vessel that the sun demands be arranged, opened, filled, sealed. You are not alone. In the shadows, others kneel. A boy with his jaw clenched so hard the tendon jumps in his neck. A girl with hands folded and knuckles bloodless. An older woman whose face is calm, the way a shuttered window is calm. No one wails. Terror here is quiet. Terror is protocol. The wind pauses, and you hear domestic noises from the city below. A dog snapping at a scrap, a clay lid set gently on a pot, laughter that shouldn't exist tonight but does. Innocence breathes somewhere very near the machinery of cruelty, as if the world is split by a knife that leaves no seam. You imagine a courtyard where a mother braids a child's hair by lamplight, where bread cools and the air smells of roasted corn. You imagine your own home, then force the thought away because it is more dangerous than the men with staffs. Memory is a rebellion. Hands turn you by the shoulders. The priest's eyes are steady, measuring. He speaks of purity and pollution the way a healer speaks of fevers. He names the body a field to be sown for divine harvest. The words brush you like moth wings, soft and intolerable. You learn, very quickly, the skill of splitting in two, a part of you that stands and nods, and a part that steps back, cataloging the room. The lacquered gourd, the corded quipu dangling like a muted rain, the little gutter where the torch drips wax that hardens in scallops. This is how one survives, by noticing something the fear has not yet eaten. A procession forms. You are placed within it. The drum persists, boom, boom, boom. The steps down are steep, worn to shallow U-shapes by generations of feet. At the landing, 2 stone jaguars meet nose to nose. Their mouths show small, square teeth. Past them, a courtyard of dark water holds the moon like a trapped eye. On its far side, a doorway yawns. The lintel is carved with the sun's face, radiant, expressionless, hungry. Inside, the air is warm and smells of fermented maize. A brazier spits. A line of painted masks leans against the wall. Faces that are faces and not faces. Gold cheeks, shell-inlaid eyes, mouths frozen mid-chant. Someone is weeping very softly, as if trying not to disturb a sleeping infant. Someone else whispers a prayer in a language you do not understand. A hand presses lightly at the back of your neck, not cruel, simply instructional. Again and again the message is the same: yield. You think of the road that brought you here. The crooked path along terraces, the alpaca herds like smudges on distant slopes, the sky so sharp you felt you could cut yourself upon it. You remember the first time you saw a courier run by, bare legs flashing, the quipu bouncing, empire braided into colored cords. It seemed then like a marvel, a clean, bright order. Now you understand that order is only the surface of a lake. Beneath it, something moves its slow, heavy body. You are in the care of the sun, the priest says, and the words land with the weight of a stone laid in a wall. Care is a beautiful word. Care can mean many things. It can mean shelter. It can mean surveillance. It can mean the end of being yours. The torches gutter and recover. The smoke stings. The drum stops, and the silence that follows is louder than sound. An intake of breath that the room holds as if afraid to exhale. You stand very still and feel your own pulse in your fingers. What is about to happen will happen not to you alone, but to the map of the world inside you. There will be a before and an after, and they will not speak to each other. Outside, wind fingers the banners on the terrace. Far below, a dog barks once, twice, then gives up. The priest lowers his hand. A novice steps forward with a cloth you are not permitted to touch. A word is spoken that you recognize only as a gate. You walk through it. To understand why this gate exists, why the empire threads innocence and horror on the same needle, you have to step back from the terrace, from the torches, from the room that swallows names. You have to see the whole body of power, the bones and the blood, the way a mountain is seen not from the path that crosses it, but from the opposite valley. Only then does the logic reveal itself. Gold spread like daylight, people arranged like stones, the sun crowned, the world obedient. Only then does the cruelty appear ordinary, necessary, sacred. Only then can we tell the truth of what was done in the name of order. The torches fade behind you, but the air of empire lingers like smoke in the lungs. To understand what you have just stepped into, you must widen your gaze beyond the terrace and the chamber. You must see the Inca world in its full expanse. Mountains carved with terraces like stairways to the sky, valleys quilted with maize and potatoes, and roads so straight they seem to defy the mountain's will. This was not a kingdom. It was an empire that swallowed landscapes, stretching from the deserts of Chile to the green edges of Colombia, binding millions under one sun. The Sapa Inca, the unique Inca, sat at its center like a spider at the heart of a web. To him belonged the mountains, the rivers, the crops, and the people. He was not a man who ruled, he was a god who owned. He claimed descent from Inti, the sun itself, and his body was treated as a vessel of light, untouchable, radiant, eternal. But his divinity was not sustained by sunlight alone. It was sustained by ritual, and ritual demanded flesh. Religion and politics here were not separate. The empire's faith was a bureaucracy of the sacred, an elaborate ledger where every act of devotion was measured, and every body could be entered as a number. This is what made sexuality so dangerous. It was not private, it was not personal. It was an instrument of empire, managed and arranged like grain in state storehouses. To deny this truth is to misunderstand how fear and obedience were sown across the Andes. The chroniclers, Spaniards who arrived as the world cracked, recorded fragments of this system. Some wrote with disgust, others with prurient fascination, all with an agenda. Garcilaso de la Vega, son of a conquistador and an Inca noblewoman, described it with a conflicted loyalty, admiration for the empire's order, horror at its rituals. From their writings, and from the whispers of later Vatican archives condemning idolatrous sexuality, we reconstruct the outlines of practices that were both sacred and profane. Among the most infamous were the Akala Kuna, the chosen women. They were gathered as children, sometimes no older than 8 or 9, selected for beauty, lineage, or simply the whim of a local governor seeking to please the sun. Taken from their villages, they were brought into cloisters of stone and gold, where they lived behind walls higher than their hopes. To the empire, they were virgins of the sun. To themselves, they were captives whose lives were no longer their own. Outwardly, their existence seemed serene. They wove the finest textiles, brewed sacred chicha beer, and prepared offerings for festivals. Their hands were praised as pure, their voices were reserved for hymns, but purity here was not protection, it was ownership. Their innocence was property of the state, controlled as carefully as the silver mines of Potosi. If their chastity was violated without sanction, the punishment was death burning, strangulation, burial alive. Yet the same empire that condemned unauthorized acts permitted, even commanded, sanctioned defilements cloaked as divine ritual. This paradox is the key. What was forbidden in ordinary life was demanded in ritual life. A young girl who resisted the advances of a priest might die as a traitor to the sun. A woman who submitted was praised as a vessel of fertility, her body rewritten as an offering. Here, cruelty hid beneath the robes of sanctity. Again and again, the empire turned the private act into a public declaration, a theater of submission staged for gods and rulers. The victims were not only women. Conquered men were subjected to humiliations that stripped them of identity. Some were forced into acts with one another under the eyes of their captors, degradation reframed as punishment. Inca law forbade unnatural acts among its own nobility, yet the same acts were imposed upon slaves and prisoners to mark them as broken. It was a double standard so absolute it became invisible to those who enforced it. And yet, amid the cruelty, the empire justified itself with visions of cosmic harmony. The Inca believed the human body was a mirror of the cosmos, male and female as sun and moon, union as fertility, blood as rain. To them, sexual rituals were not desecrations, but alignments, ways of stitching the human world to the celestial. Crops grew, armies marched, cities thrived, all bound to the rhythm of flesh offered to gods. It was order, but order purchased with terror. Imagine the contrast. In the same city where a mother taught her child to walk, a priest might strip a girl and declare her a wife of the sun. In the same plaza where merchants haggled over coca leaves, captives were paraded naked as punishment for rebellion. Innocence and horror lived side by side, and neither interrupted the other. The architecture itself bore witness. Temples gleamed with gold sheets that caught dawn like fire. Courtyards were lined with walls where not a single stone protruded, a perfection that mirrored the empire's dream of absolute control. But within those walls, behind the polished surface, bodies bent, bled, and broke. The contrast was not an accident. It was the point. For the Inca elite, beauty and terror were two faces of the same god. The Spanish would later seize upon these accounts to justify conquest. They painted the empire as decadent, perverse, in need of Christian cleansing. Yet their disgust was laced with fascination. They lingered over descriptions of festivals, of dancers moving in great circles, of acts performed beneath banners of woven gold. Their words betray not only horror, but voyeurism. In condemning, they also preserved. In damning, they also revealed. This is how history survives, through biased eyes, through voices that were both witnesses and executioners. What we inherit are fragments, distorted but still heavy with truth. And that truth is simple. Sexuality in the Inca Empire was not love, not intimacy, not choice. It was ritual, it was politics, it was control. Step back now, and look again at the terrace where you stood. The torches, the priest, the silence of the kneeling captives. All of it is framed by this larger order. The ritual you are drawn into is not a single cruelty. It is a thread in a vast tapestry of control that bound an empire together. And yet, within that tapestry, there was a moment when the pattern turned darker still. When the empire, confident in its divinity, began to demand not only obedience but irreversible surrender of body and soul. That moment is the pivot, the point where fear ceased to be hidden and became spectacle. It is here, at this turning point, that we must now descend into the chambers where innocence was bound, where ritual ceased to disguise cruelty and became cruelty itself. The chamber is smaller than you expect. After the vast plazas and sunlit terraces, this room feels like a throat, narrow and suffocating. The walls lean close, blocks fitted so perfectly that they seem to press inwards, as if the mountain itself wishes to watch. A brazier burns with coca leaves and llama fat, the smoke curling in threads that sting your eyes and numb your tongue. You swallow, but the taste of copper remains. Here stand the Akala Kuna, the chosen women. They are girls more than women, their bodies caught between childhood and expectation. 8 years old, 10, 12. Taken from villages scattered across valleys and mountains, they have not seen their mothers in years. Their hair is braided in shining black ropes, their cheeks stained with annatto red, their hands folded like folded wings. They are taught to weave, to brew, to sing hymns, but above all, they are taught silence. Tonight, silence is broken. The priest speaks, his voice calm and unwavering. He says these girls are brides of Inti, the sun, chosen to embody purity. He calls their bodies sacred soil, to be plowed, seeded, harvested in ritual. His words are soft, but his eyes never waver. You feel the cruelty in the tenderness, the way a hunter might stroke the fur of the animal he is about to kill. A girl is led forward. Her steps are tiny, careful, as if the ground itself might open beneath her. She cannot be more than 11. The smell of burnt resin clings to her tunic. She kneels before the altar, and her hair is cut. The strands fall into the fire and hiss. The room fills with the stink of singed keratin. Her tears shine in the torchlight, but she makes no sound. She has been taught that sound is betrayal. The act begins not with touch, but with ritual words. She is told she is a vessel. She is told she belongs not to herself, not to her family, but to the sun. The cruelty hides beneath poetry. To refuse is to die, to submit is to be sanctified. This is the paradox of empire. What would be called crime in the village is called divinity in the temple. You imagine her mother somewhere in the highlands, staring at an empty mat where her daughter once slept, whispering a name that no one will answer. The mother's grief is silent, hidden in the folds of daily life, while here the daughter's silence is demanded as spectacle. Innocence and horror entwined like threads in a loom. The ritual proceeds. A cloth is draped across the girl's shoulders, not to protect, but to conceal what will be done. The men chant, the women watch with downcast eyes. The cruelty is not private. It is structured, supervised, sanctioned. This is not an act of passion, but of policy. Her body is a ledger entry, a gift marked in the empire's spiritual account book. And then it is over. The girl collapses, not from wounds visible, but from something taken. Her body shakes in small tremors, the way a bird shudders when held too tightly. She is lifted, carried to the side, replaced by another, again the chants, again the cloth, again the silence. The repetition is worse than the act itself, for it teaches you that this is not an accident, but a system. The chroniclers describe such rituals with tones that waver between disgust and fascination. Pedro Cieza de Leon wrote of maidens consecrated to the service of the sun, guarded with jealousy, yet yielded in sacrifice. The contradictions in his words echo the contradictions of the ritual itself. Purity celebrated, purity destroyed. Even centuries later, the ink trembles with unease. For the girls, there is no contradiction. There is only the knowledge that their childhood has been devoured. Their songs, once sung in play, are now hymns. Their weaving, once taught by mothers, is now demanded by priests. Their bodies, once their own, are now property of gods. You feel the weight of it, the irreversible turn. This is the point of no return, not just for the girls but for the entire society. When innocence is bound to the altar, when purity is weaponized, the empire crosses a threshold. Fear no longer hides behind walls, it becomes the foundation of power itself. Outside, the city breathes as if nothing has changed. Merchants still haggle, dogs still bark, families still sleep. Yet inside this chamber, history bends. You realize this is how cruelty survives, not through chaos, but through order. Not through open brutality, but through ritual repetition that makes horror look inevitable. The girl with shorn hair will never walk home. Her name will never be spoken at her family's hearth. She has become a shadow in the Empire's ledger, a number hidden beneath the gold surface. She has become a cautionary tale to the younger girls still weaving, who lower their eyes and wonder when their turn will come. The torch sputters, the brazier spits sparks, the air thickens until breathing feels like swallowing cloth. You close your eyes and hear the rhythm, chant, sob, silence. Again and again. Innocence offered, innocence consumed. This is the catalyst, the moment where cruelty ceases to be rumor and becomes undeniable. It is the moment when you understand that the Inca world, magnificent in its stone and order, is also a machine of flesh. And yet, this chamber is not the worst. What happens here is hidden, whispered, contained. Beyond these walls lies something darker still, the public stage, the festivals where humiliation was not confined to silence but displayed before thousands, where cruelty ceased to be private ritual and became public theater. That is where the descent begins. That is where the mask of sanctity slips and the Empire reveals its truest face. The chamber was suffocating, yes, but it was also private. What happens next does not hide. It does not whisper. It shouts. The Empire makes cruelty into spectacle, so that thousands of eyes can see what power does, and thousands of mouths can carry the story back to the mountains, valleys, and deserts. Fear, in this form, is not only felt, it is performed. You are led into the open air of Cusco's Great Plaza, a vast stone square where the Empire gathers under the burning sun. The smell of maize beer thickens the air, sweet and yeasty, mingling with sweat, with roasted guinea pig, with the copper tang of blood that never seems to leave the stones. Drums thunder from every corner, and their rhythm pulses in your chest like a second heart. The plaza is alive with banners, gold ornaments flashing, dancers in feathered costumes swirling like sparks from a fire. To the unknowing, it is celebration. To those who have seen the chambers, it is terror wrapped in beauty. At the heart of this carnival is Inti Raymi, the festival of the sun. Outsiders called it a feast. Insiders knew it was a proving ground of power. For 3 days and nights, the nobility drank, sang, and chanted prayers to Inti. But beneath the hymns and dances, another ritual unfolded, one where sexuality was pulled from the shadows and displayed before the crowd. Imagine, a conquered tribe brought in chains, their leaders forced to strip naked before the Sapa Inca's throne. Their bodies, marked by travel and hunger, are paraded through the plaza as laughter ripples through the watching crowds. Women clutch infants to their breasts, men bow their heads in shame. Yet the humiliation does not end there. Priests command them into degrading acts, framed as offerings to the sun. They are not allowed refusal. Their degradation is part of the festival itself, a dark undercurrent beneath the gold and feather. This was punishment as theater. To the conquerors, it reaffirmed dominance. To the conquered, it was a scar carved into memory. To the innocent bystanders, the children of Cusco, the merchants in the plaza, it was a warning: resist, and you too will be displayed. The Spaniards who recorded these scenes lingered on the details. Some accounts describe forced orgiastic dances, men and women driven together while coca and alcohol dulled their senses. The body became a stage, a puppet manipulated by priests who smiled as if nothing unnatural was occurring. It was for the fertility of the fields, they wrote, their pens betraying both horror and voyeurism. But fertility was the mask, control was the truth. The rituals escalated as the festivals deepened. By the second night, intoxication was demanded, not optional. Cups of chicha thick sour beer were pressed to lips until refusals drowned in froth. Priests scattered coca leaves on the ground, forcing captives to chew until their jaws went numb, their minds slowed, their limbs pliant. Under these substances, men and women were compelled into acts they did not comprehend fully, their humiliation framed as cosmic necessity. The crowd watched, cheered, and sang hymns that mixed praise with mockery. Again and again, the same scene unfolded, captives bent, touched, exposed. Their cries, sometimes muffled, sometimes breaking into high-pitched wails, were drowned by drums. A victim's sob became rhythm. A captive's trembling became choreography. The cruelty did not disrupt the festival, it fed it. Consider the contrast. Nobles in golden headdresses feasting on roasted meats, while at their feet, stripped peasants performed rituals that blurred the line between sacrifice and violation. Children ran through the crowd chasing painted balls, while only steps away, another child, barely a teenager, was forced into a fertility offering. The festival was not divided between innocence and horror. It was both at once, tangled so tightly that no one could separate them. Some chroniclers wrote of mutilations disguised as offerings. Captives' genitals were cut, their blood sprinkled on fields, their screams drowned by hymns. The body was not only used, it was broken, reshaped, marked forever. The sun was said to demand this, and the priests delivered it, their hands steady, their faces serene. To them, cruelty was not cruelty, it was duty. The humiliation was not confined to the weak. Sometimes, nobles from rebellious provinces were seized and forced into the same degradation, their prestige stripped in front of thousands. Imagine a once proud leader, dressed in fine tunic and feathers, dragged naked before the crowd, compelled into acts that erased his dignity. The crowd did not see a man. They saw an empire proving that no rank, no pride, no heritage could resist the sun's demand. And always, women bore the heaviest weight. Some were paraded with painted bellies, symbols of fertility, forced to dance until their legs collapsed. Others were given to soldiers in public, their cries merging with the cheers. The empire called it cosmic union, but it was violation by decree. Mothers clutched their children, knowing that those too young to understand were being taught with their eyes, power takes what it wants, and gods approve. Spanish priests who witnessed such scenes recoiled, yet their ink betrays fascination. They describe the flicker of torches on sweating skin, the glint of knives, the sound of laughter mingled with screams. In condemning, they preserved. Their words became the only testimony for those whose voices were stolen. The progression always followed the same arc: intoxication, humiliation, violation, destruction. A captive might be used, mocked, and then sacrificed, his body slumped, his blood feeding both soil and spectacle. A woman might be paraded, defiled, then strangled with a cord as the crowd chanted hymns. The message was inescapable: resistance ends not in quiet death but in public unmaking. You watch, and the horror is not only in what is done but in the normality of it. Children laugh. Musicians play. Priests smile as if nothing unspeakable is occurring. Cruelty has been disguised as celebration so completely that even participants sometimes forget to see it for what it is. This is how empire works. It wraps horror in gold, calls it holy, and teaches the crowd to clap. The drums rise. Torches flare. Another captive is dragged forward. His knees buckle, but soldiers yank him upright. A knife flashes. The crowd roars. Blood splashes the stones, mixing with spilled chicha. The festival continues. No pause, no mourning. The plaza is a mouth, swallowing flesh and exhaling chants. And you realize this is not chaos. It is choreography. Every humiliation, every scream, every drop of blood is arranged like steps in a dance. The cruelty is not random. It is calculated, perfected, repeated year after year until terror itself becomes tradition. Empathy catches you by the throat. You see the trembling hands of a boy forced into ritual, the blank stare of a girl whose tears have already dried, the hollow eyes of a mother watching her child offered up. They are not faceless victims. They are human beings carved into symbols. They become warnings to you, centuries later, that cruelty thrives when it is sanctified, when it is applauded, when it becomes ritual. The festival ends with bonfires. Captives, their bodies broken, are cast into flames or left to collapse on the stone. Nobles return to their palaces, priests to their cloisters, families to their homes. The plaza empties, but the echo of screams lingers in the stones. You swear the ground itself remembers, the way a scar remembers the blade. And yet, within the private chambers of the nobility, darker scenes awaited. If public festivals were theater, then the secret rites of the Sapa Inca were confessionals of paranoia and desire. Behind closed doors, in candlelit rooms heavy with cinnabar fumes, the rituals stripped away the last disguise of sanctity. You step back from the plaza. You hear the drums fading, but the descent is not over. What comes next is the deepest layer, where cruelty is no longer a performance for the crowd, but a desperate invocation whispered in shadows. The festival has ended, but the echo of drums still beats in your skull. You imagine it is finished, that the plaza's horrors were the deepest the empire could sink. But there is another chamber, one hidden from the eyes of the crowd, where cruelty becomes most intimate. Here, there is no need for spectacle. Here, the empire reveals its truest face. You are led through narrow corridors lined with painted walls. The air grows hotter, thicker, heavy with the sweetness of burnt cinnabar and the sour tang of fermenting maize. A door of carved stone grinds open, and you enter the final sanctum, the private ritual chamber of the Sapa Inca. The room is small but suffocating in its detail. Gold sheets cover the walls, their surfaces stamped with images of suns, jaguars, serpents. The flicker of candlelight makes them seem to writhe. The floor is scattered with coca leaves, trampled into a bitter carpet. At the center, a low altar smokes. Around it, the Inca's chosen attendants kneel, faces painted, bodies trembling, eyes hollow with exhaustion. Here, innocence is not merely taken, it is consumed. The Sapa Inca sits draped in crimson cloth, a mask of hammered gold hiding his face. He does not speak. His silence is heavier than any chant. With a gesture, captives are brought forward. Boys with shaved heads, girls with painted bellies, their bodies anointed in oils that make their skin glisten in the dim light. They are not called victims, they are called offerings. The difference is a lie. The acts that follow are not new. They are echoes of what the priests and the plaza already displayed. But here, stripped of witnesses, the rituals take on the raw edge of desperation. The empire trembles at its borders, threatened by rebellion, disease, and rumors of strange men arriving by sea. The Sapa Inca believes the gods demand greater sacrifices. So the body becomes the final altar, the last coin to buy divine favor. The captives are arranged like objects, their cries muffled by cloth, their limbs held by attendants. They are violated, bloodied, broken, each act performed as if it were a prayer. Again and again, the line between sex and sacrifice vanishes until the two are indistinguishable. A girl collapses, her body painted with her own blood. A boy's screams rise, crack, fall silent. No one moves to comfort them. Comfort is treason. You feel the weight of silence pressing in. The attendants do not speak. The victims do not plead. The only voice is the occasional groan of the altar's fire, the crackle of resin as it devours another offering. The cruelty here is not flamboyant. It is clinical, methodical, inevitable. And then comes the final act. Those who survive the ritual are strangled, their throats closed with cords of woven fiber. Others are bled, their bodies slumping forward, their blood drained into bowls that are poured on the earth. The Sapa Inca lifts his hands, stained red, and the attendants bow low. The empire believes the gods have been fed. But you see something else, a civilization eating itself alive, its rituals becoming more grotesque as its fear deepens. This is not strength. It is decay disguised as divinity. The collapse comes swiftly. The Spaniards arrive, armed with steel, carrying crosses. They find a city of gold and a people bound by fear. Chroniclers gasp at what they see, rituals of blood, children cloistered in silence, public spectacles of humiliation. They write with disgust, but also with eagerness, for each horror they describe becomes a weapon to justify conquest. These are savages, they claim. Their sins demand erasure. The irony cuts deep. In condemning Inca cruelty, the conquerors unleash their own. They destroy temples, burn idols, enslave survivors. They erase one empire with another, claiming to cleanse, but only replacing one cruelty with a new form. The victims' voices vanish beneath layers of conquest, buried beneath centuries of silence. And yet the stones remember. The plazas where bodies once trembled still echo with whispers. The walls, fitted tighter than breath, still stand, as if to remind the world of what was built and what was broken. You are left with a question that hovers like smoke. What does power do to the human soul? Again and again, history answers the same way. Power corrupts. Power sanctifies cruelty. Power makes the body into an altar, the innocent into offerings. the girls of the Akala Kuna, shorn of hair and childhood, the captives paraded in the plazas, their cries drowned by drums, the nameless victims of the Sapa Incas' secret chambers. Their suffering is the shadow beneath the gold, the truth beneath the myth of order. And so you stand, centuries later, looking back. You feel horror, you feel pity, you feel gratitude that you are not there, that your body is not the one bound to the altar. But you also feel responsibility to remember, to speak, to refuse silence, because history is not only about the past, it is a mirror. And when you gaze into the Incas' rituals, you see not only their cruelty, but the pattern of cruelty itself, the way it disguises as order, the way it thrives in silence, the way it waits for its next empire to give it breath. The torches fade, the drums still, the gold gleams, but it gleams like a wound. And in that gleam, one truth remains. When the body becomes an altar, the soul of a civilization is already lost.